Hey, guys.
All right. Well, it's wonderful to see everyone, and Deputy Secretary General, it's really wonderful to see you again. I've been looking forward to this conversation for some time. I wanted to start maybe with a more reflective question. You stepped into your role as the Deputy Secretary General in 2019. What have you seen change within NATO over that time period?
Thank you, Andrea. Good to see you. She briefed us in NATO, and we are still recovering from her briefing. Good to be back at the public forum. Listen, I've been privileged to serve this alliance for the last 5 years, together with our Secretary General. And I think this relatively short period of history is indicative of the world that we are living and will be living through. So consider this. I just arrived, we have a pandemic. And this has put to test the way in which we work. And we work with lots of classified things, so teleworking is not always the easiest solution for us. And then we had the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was a very complicated issue. And then, to be honest, we also had a number of cyber incidents, and the Secretary General asked me to look into cyber resilience of the organization. And then we entered the era of hyper-acceleration of technology. AI, biotech, synthetic biology. We have our chief scientist here, Dr. Wells, that is also looking into the future with, let's say, a lot of professionalism. So I would say that in its nutshell, and of course the war in Ukraine and the summit now in Washington. Yeah. So I would say that NATO we have in our genes, in a way, in our genetical code, a gene of adaptation to transformation of geopolitical and strategic environments. And I gave you a variety of shocks and transformative evolutions that are indicating that NATO is an organization that has this capacity to adjust, transform, and be relevant to our citizens.
Yeah, we'll dive into some of that throughout this conversation. But you talked about the shocks and the challenges, but you and with Secretary General Stoltenberg have accomplished so much during your time at NATO. You in particular have been focused on fostering NATO's partnerships, championing innovation across the alliance, and also finding ways to increase our resilience and adaptability. So a lot has been done in each of those ways, but what would you say is some of the unfinished business? Where do you think on some of those issues that you've been so instrumental in pushing forward, where do you think the alliance needs to go?
You know, we made a lot of progress. I think where we all have to do much better is, one, to harness the talent of our innovation ecosystem all across the alliance and our partnerships. We just came from a second session of our summit with our Indo-Pacific partners, with the EU. They're, in a way, organically linked to us in terms of democracy, the way in which you see the world, and their economic models. So the first thing we should do, and that's what I'm doing as chair of innovation in NATO, is making sure that not only the big universities and the big tech companies and the big countries in NATO that are so advanced, and that's good, are contributing to this innovation ecosystem, which is the big differentiator, if you want, in global affairs historically. But also Albania, Estonia, Romania, my country, everyone has talent. Everyone has a smart, young woman or man here that could really want to start from a smaller country, a business, a startup. And if there's something I'm very proud of, together with my colleagues, that we are able to have in the last few years, Diana, which is the Defense Innovation Accelerator for North Atlantic, test centers, accelerators, and if you have bright ideas, come to us and test your ideas for free for you to basically mature. And I hope from this hall, or the ones watching us, will have the future unicorns. Mm-hmm. Also, we were the first ones in the world to create a NATO Innovation Fund, which is the first multinational sovereign venture capital fund in the world. Sounds counterintuitive and even explosive in what I say. Yes, we managed to do it, to convince allies to put some money, and that's the way in which we try to adjust. If there is one challenge to all of us, is that the fact that we should adapt better to the speed of transformation. We are still too slow in procurement. We are still sometimes sluggish in terms of diffusion of technology. We should be much more early adapters, and I think NATO is moving in that direction. But if I would say something, especially governments, institutions like us, we have a relative slowness which is inside. To give you an example of the way in which we are adapting, we have an AI strategy back in 2021. Every piece of technology policy in NATO has an ethical use part to that. Compulsory. We want to be the gold standard on technology in national security, but also on ethical use. And we have, this system of committees and boards in NATO. For the AI and big data board in NATO, for the first time, we have private sector sitting around the NATO table, because the dialogue between us, private sector, civil society, and academia, the triple helix of innovation is something we do. We are still too slow. We have to move much faster, to be more innovative, and also take risks in a way, because if not, the speed of transformation could really create trouble for us down the road.
Yeah. Another area that I understand that you've spent a lot of time in and focus on is on defense spending and reaching out to different member states to make the case why we all need to spend more on security and defense. And when you're making the case to elected officials, it's obviously not always an easy case to make, because they have competing priorities, domestic expenditures, and other things that they need to do at home. And so when you go out and you're having these discussions with other elected officials about why they need to spend more, what's the case that you make?
Listen, I'm a political person myself, so I know how difficult it is for a political leader. Then you have so much conflicting and overlapping priorities. There's so much need for education and for infrastructure and for healthcare and for climate change. They are massive. They are massive priorities. But I think what the war in Ukraine and the aggressiveness of Russia and if you want, this collection of China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, at least in Europe, I think, it triggered a sort of a strategic awakening to a tough world. Yeah. So in a way, when you see war in Europe back after many decades, after the Second World War, in fact, our public opinions, our young ones, the taxpayers, in a way, they see, oh, this is dangerous, so there is a little bit easier for us to make the case to spend more on defense. And that's why from 3 allies meeting the 2% threshold in 2014 in Wales, now we have 23, and every ally has a plan to reach 2%, at least. But the problem is not only how much money you put in, but how you spend it. Yeah. And that's another place where NATO is giving exceptional guidance and advice to all allies. Because there's always, especially when you're lagging behind, many allies have underinvested in defense for decades. And now you have a little bit more money, and how do you spend that money? On which let's say, catching up with more classical equipment that we miss, or high-tech, high-end. And that's why in NATO, through our NATO defense planning processes, we are in fact advising and guiding allies to making sure that they don't choose. It's a false dilemma, let's say, more traditional, conventional, or high-tech. It should be both together. And in a way, you're also saving taxpayers' money. That's why I'm so happy to see also here in Washington at the Chamber of Commerce so many signings of contracts among many allies, purchasing together, best return on investment, more agility. So this is something that I believe we are moving in the right direction. Let me also give you an example, especially for the young ones here in this room. So back in the 60s and the 70s, 90% of all technology used and innovation used for national security and defense was produced by governments. Department of Energy, labs, NASA, DARPA, all these kind of things. Today, 90%, the same 90% of everything we use in national defense and security is produced by the private sector. So that's why we need to work in sync and organically consult. And if this pendulum that was basically going far, probably too much towards the government some decades ago, now it's going as it should be to the private sector, we have to find a right balance and a sense of collaboration and understanding that between economy and security there is an interdependence which is felt not only in defense, but everything we do has an economic and security aspect. So security economy. And something that we are very much working on together with many allies, and that's why we welcome the arrival of Finland and Sweden into our alliance, not only because they are, high-end, sophisticated, strong democracies, strong technological nations, because we are probably one of the best in the world in terms of societal resilience. They know how to absorb shocks. And if there is disruption in your society or economy for whatever reason, the idea now is not only to go back to the status quo ante, so just to restore the functions of government, but to use a crisis to move to the next level. So that's why societal resilience is something that we work very much, and that's why more on the resilience on a defense side and resilience on the civilian side is something that we do.
Well, you raised such an important issue on this resilience because, as we talked about when I was in Brussels, there is a significant uptick in Russian efforts to undermine the alliance using these hybrid threats, and everything from the GPS jamming to the news today about an alleged assassination plot against a German defense manufacturer, blowing up the weapons depots, et cetera, et cetera. There has been a substantive uptick in what Russia is trying to do. Is NATO prepared and equipped, and how is NATO planning to respond to these types of threats? Because the risk is that if it's just Latvia's problem or just France's problem, that those costs are manageable from the Kremlin. So how is the alliance thinking about taking this issue on?
Our defense ministers, just a few weeks before the summit, we adopted that ministerial a beginning of a more concerted response from NATO to a concerted policy of aggressiveness by Russia against our interests across the board. Cyber attacks against water plants in America, assassinations, espionage, sabotage, risks to our critical infrastructure, things that disinformation, misinformation, meddling with our election campaigns. So if you treat, you're right, Andrea, if you treat this individually, this is Lithuania's problem or Germany's problem, or America's problem, and we don't inform each other through intelligence sharing and learning from each other, then our response would be basically segmented and less effective. So that's why we also, our leaders will approve later today, I think, also a special strategy of countering Russian malign influence in the Western Balkans. And across the alliance, we are working to really push back and basically be far more effective. To make a very clear point here, we don't see Russia having, at least today, the capacity or the intent to attack NATO because we are a much bigger player and we are also investing much more, deterrence and defense, new plans. But in terms of everything under the Article 5 threshold, they're using everything against our interest. And sometimes we see Russia and China, sometimes and Iran, even North Korea, affecting our interests. So you're right. On the hybrid side, on this kind of concerted efforts, we are taking collective efforts. And by the next summit in The Hague, we'll be adopting an overarching Russia policy, NATO, that will be taking into account basically as you mentioned when you visited with us, a pattern of aggressiveness by Russia against our interests, and the fact that Russia as a nation, as official ideology, as economy, as defense or foreign policy, they are basically organizing themselves for the long haul to be aggressive against the West. And also, as a political guy, when you have domestic problems, you have to invent a foreign adversary, a foe from the outside. That's propaganda manual 1.0. And they're doing just this. Mm-hmm. NATO has no aggressive intentions against Russia, a defensive alliance. They're trying to portray NATO, America, EU, whatever, as the big existential threat to Russia, which is total nonsense, just to justify a grip of power inside, and together with other countries like China and the others, just to unravel the world order. that we represent and embody through NATO.
Well, I want to pick up on that theme exactly, which is, strategic competition has been a big focus of this. We've had panels on the axis of upheaval, the growing cooperation between Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. How do you think that competition and this alignment and increasing coordination among revisionist actors will shape the alliance moving forward? How is the alliance thinking about dealing with this shifting geopolitical landscape?
We just came from the session of our summit with our Indo-Pacific partners and European Union. And the first natural answer is to really reach out and work much closer with our natural partners, which are democratic nations from all over the world. Of course, respecting Washington Treaty indicates that we are a transatlantic organization. We are not a global organization, but security is global. That's one thing. We should do much more together. We should really bring NATO and the EU even closer strategically in using the respective toolbox of the two organizations. We have to work with many of our partners. But there is something that our leaders, and I myself, as a person with some experience in international affairs and politics in general, I think we have to do a much better job in reaching out to the other nations that are neither, let's say, explicitly with us nor with the other group of countries. And this is where we have to do a much better job together. That's why I was so happy with Secretary Blinken yesterday to host our partners from Mongolia, from Indo-Pacific, from Armenia, from the Republic of Moldova, which is under immense Russian hybrid pressure, from Bosnia, from Colombia, from all over the place. So I think not only NATO, but NATO and the EU and our nations, we should do a much better job in reaching out to these countries. To be honest, sometimes to be a little more humble when talking to them. And there are players in the world that in the end will be also determining in UN the balance of power and the shape of world order. Number one condition, let's make sure that we stay united in NATO. Let's make sure we reach out to our natural partners as democracies around the world, and let's together offer a better deal to the others. Better deal, also economically, not only in strategic terms. The India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, which was launched at the G20 New Delhi summit. That's a big thing, which was in a way says not only the Belt and Road, there are other ways to connect India to the Middle East and to Europe. So I think there is a lot of work we need to do inside NATO with our partners, but also to do a much better job and offer these nations that will be basically the ones that will be, in a way, creating, a new reality in world affairs, a deal and the respect that they deserve, because I think they also want, in fact, the same thing like we do. They do not want a world which is the rule of the jungle is dominating that thing. They want predictability. They want to grow. They want business. They want maritime, freedom of navigation. They want rules for cyber, for AI, for biotech. We all want the same. But if we don't offer them a genuine, fresh, respectful, and also money-supported deal, they might be tempted to go elsewhere. And this will be really an issue that we should avoid by all means.
We have a teeny bit of time left, and I thought I would take then the opportunity to ask, this is a historic summit, the 75th. What are you most proud of coming out of this summit?
Listen, perhaps I'm subjective all my life, my young life as a young ambassador of Romania. I tried to bring my country into NATO, and here I am after a number of years at the top of this great alliance of ours. So on a personal level, this is a matter of immense pride. On a more political and strategic nature, I would like to say that I'm so proud to see that 32 allied nations, 1 billion people, 53% of global GDP, adjusting to this difficult period of transition. The world is in flux. And if I see how quickly we're adjusting to this new reality, how we can sometimes avoid natural differences amongst allied nations, because it's not easy to keep consensus in this alliance. And I think that NATO is today, against very difficult headwinds, more united, stronger, more relevant. And if I can use a word, because please wrap up, says Joel, I would say, I can really say, like Madeleine Albright a few decades back, that NATO is today the indispensable alliance, not only for our peace and security, but also for global stability and predictability. NATO is as essential to our nations and to the world as 75 years ago, and nothing gives you more pride. And also for the young ones, this is your alliance too. This is not for Jens Stoltenberg or Mircea Geoană or our leaders, you see them on the podium. This is your alliance. We are really the foundation of peace and everything you do with your lives. So if there's something I would like to have a legacy of pride and the generations to come, take the lead from us, move it forward, because this is a foundation of peace and security, democracy, and our way of life. I couldn't have been prouder to serve this great alliance than for the last 5 years.
I always love a conversation that ends on a positive note, so that was perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.